Our client today is Hunger Warriors, a nonprofit with ambitions to solve world hunger. While approximately 1/10 of the human population goes to bed hungry, Hunger Warriors aims to bring this number to 0. One of their primary initiatives is to reduce food waste, which represents $1.5 trillion in lost value per year. They've tasked us with identifying the major sources of food waste and determining the best course of action to reduce this. How would you approach this problem?
Okay, thank you for that. Just bear with me 1 second. Reduce. Okay, so thank you for that. So it sounds like we're advising Hunger Warriors, a nonprofit, and they're really, their organization is focused on reducing food waste worldwide, 1.5 trillion in waste annually, I believe. And they've brought us in to identify where food waste occurs and how to reduce it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And now I imagine when we say that we're trying to identify the source of food waste, we're really only doing that with the objective of then reducing. So would it be fair to say that, really the thing that we're being brought in to solve is reducing food waste, figuring out how to do that?
Yeah, ultimately the diagnosing where the issue lies will be in service of helping to eventually fix it. So that's the right way of thinking about it.
Beautiful, perfect. And then, in terms of this nonprofit, are they implementing all of this, or are we more just thinking about it at a high level, kind of like, advising the WHO or something like that? Is this more just like a macro think tank sort of thing?
Yeah, you can think about it of advising them. We want to find what initiatives would be helpful towards reducing this global problem, but we don't have to worry about as much like going and executing yet. Let's get the plan in place. Perfect.
And last thing, in terms of executing this, do we have any viewpoints around like the scope of this in terms of how much we need to reduce, by what amount, and then of course any cost constraints? Are we considering cost here, or
Yeah, so as we mentioned, the goal is to bring food waste down to 0. So there's no specific target for this project, but they have big ambitions as an organization.
Okay.
In terms of budget, there's no direct limit to it. However, it will be dependent on donations and the funding that the organization is able to get.
Makes total sense.
You can assume that, it's somewhat uncapped at the moment.
Okay. Beautiful. Makes sense. Okay, if you can bear with me just a minute or two, I'll come up with an approach for this and get right back to you.
Great. Go for it.
Thank you. Okay. So the way that I'm thinking about this, a little bit in terms of the flow of food, so to speak. So what I mean by this is we're looking, number one, at the actual farms and production points of food. Number two, we're looking at the actual distribution of this food. And number three, we're looking at the consumption of the food.
Okay.
So across all three of these, I'm essentially thinking about how we can reduce the wastage across these three main areas. I imagine that a lot of this gets lost at the end. I know that grocery stores, restaurants, consumers, etc., leave a lot of waste on the table. Though I do imagine that there is also quite a lot of wastage in farm and distribution. I know that farmers throw out imperfect produce, et cetera, et cetera. So it'll be interesting to see where the most happens. But when I'm looking at the first area, so actual food production, so to speak, there's growing the food, there's maintaining the crops, and then there's harvesting. And so we'd want to look at those three main areas to go, okay, where can we, I know we're not quite talking about output, but get more output and get less wastage.
Yeah.
In the secondary of distribution, you have the actual packaging of the food, and of course, there's packaging of things like tomatoes and fruits, but there's also, of course, packaging of produce, of actual processed foods as well. We're not just talking farms; we're also talking the manufacturing chain. Then there's, of course, storing them, so storing them in warehouses, et cetera, where if temperatures rise too much, if you're not storing them properly, there's wastage. And then finally, the transport, where I imagine a lot of wastage occurs as well. Bumpy roads, bumpy trucks flying through the air, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Finally, we're looking at the third area, the consumption side. You have restaurants, you have grocery stores, you have individuals and households. But really, we're looking at the purchase point. So where consumers go to purchase, where's the wastage occurring there? There's the cooking point, where's wastage occurring within cooking. So, again, you can kind of think restaurants, but also even at home when you're, throwing things out, et cetera. And then there's the consumption point, right? Plates too full, the restaurant serves too much, people throw it in the bin, or obviously at home you have leftovers. So I'm trying to look at it across all those three areas. And, even though I think potentially consumer side would have the most, followed by the production side, followed by the distribution. I do like thinking about this in terms of a flow. So the first thing I'd like to ask is if we have any information on the production side of things, what's actually happening, as we're growing these crops, et cetera.
Yeah, we don't have specifics as to what is actually going on there at the moment. What else could be useful for you as you get going here?
Do we have breakdowns across these three areas, or any sort of overview of where wastage occurs the most?
Yeah, absolutely we do. Let me show you that data. I'm curious what you make of it. So that should come up on your screen in just a moment.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, so it looks like what I have here. So we've got the production loss across the value chain. Oh, interesting. So, I sort of got this, I guess. Consumers at table fits on my third bucket. Distribution, retail side of that fourth one fits as well. And then you've kind of got the processing and packaging and distribution, as well as storage, handling, and transport is sort of my middle one. And then the first one seems to be production. So that's interesting. This essentially matches. It's more split out than what I had. But what I can see here is production by far is where we lose the most, followed by consumers, and then distribution, retail, and storage, handling, transport. Okay, so the two main culprits, production and consumers. So production at 13%, and consumers 8%. So consumers at table, I just wanted to double check. That sounds like that's households once they've bought, they're at home. Whereas I imagine distribution retail is more like restaurants and grocery stores and that sort of thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the right way to think about it.
Okay, perfect. Kind of the last thing I see here is just that, this all added up is actually quite a lot of waste. I'm looking at around 30%. So again, just so that I'm interpreting this exhibit correctly, this is all food produced, and this is saying the percent of all food produced that's lost. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they're additively, it gives you the total percent that's lost by the end of the process.
Okay, very significant. Not particularly surprising, but okay. So yeah, number one takeaway is just that 30 to 35% of all food is just wasted. So of course, this initiative makes a lot of sense. You can get high ROI just by reducing this wastage. Much like a petrol engine. The second takeaway is we'd want to focus in first on production and consumers to see where we can reduce, or that those are the main contributors. So we want to focus in on those. Okay. My main question moving forward would then be, Do we have any sort of breakdown of production or consumers? Anything around, you know, could we split this out further? Do we know more about where this production is, loss is occurring?
Do you have a hypothesis about, let's start with the production side. We'll come back to consumers potentially down the line, but let's focus on the biggest problem first. What's your hypothesis or set of hypotheses about where the production issue might be happening, either geographically or demographically or something in that sense?
Interesting. Do you mind if I take just 30 seconds for that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Okay. So I think you can think of this in sort of from two angles: developed world and emerging world, or developing world, but also within those two worlds, the contributors or the places. So you have environment, you have process, and you have tools. So when it comes to the environment, this is just inherently what's happening with the environment. In the developing world, they are more susceptible in general to climate change and these difficult weather patterns. So that could be one area where we're getting a lot of wastage, where you have unexpected, you know, frost, unexpected flooding, etc., and they're less able to mitigate that. Then you have the processes, which are partly mitigation actions when events occur, but this is really just, you know, crop rotation, things like slash and burn being ineffective after a couple of years. Just basically, how do you get the most out of your fields and crops and even production lines? I shouldn't walk in just to farms. I should think about, you know, canned products and processed foods. And then the third is the tools and the tech. So obviously, you know, using a mule to pull a plow versus using a tractor, things like that. And honestly, even in tools and tech, I'm putting things like fertilizer and nitrogen and ammonia and bringing in those things. So when I look at this, I think wastage is probably higher in developed markets, though output is lower in non-developed. And, you know, now I'm at a bit of a crossroads because I know that our objective is not to increase output. So we would look more at reducing wastage where it is made. Though you can look at wastage as wasting a percent plot of land as well, but I know that that's not quite where we're at. In terms of processes, you have to think that the developing world is going to be losing more due to lack of proper farming practices and optimization of their land. Harvesting at the right time, predicting the weather events, knowing what plants to crop, when and where and how, all of that. And then also in terms of tools and tech, I think the developing world is also going to be, you know, behind what the developed world is doing in terms of wastage. So in terms of kind of environment, I think developed world probably has a little bit more just because they're producing more. But in terms of process and then tools and tech, the non-developed world, I imagine is where the most wastage occurs. But yes, that's kind of, those are kind of my views and hypotheses there.
Yeah, I think that's the right assessment. There are a lot of problems on the production front in the developing world, especially with regards to what you mentioned on the process and tools front. So that is where most of that problem lies. That's great. Now let's start to get into some solutioning around that. So when you think about the ways that this organization could actually help resolve that problem, especially in the developing world, what are some ideas you have to go about that?
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't always love to do the root cause solution technique, but in this instance, it probably, you know, makes sense. Where we have problems, we match the solutions. So I can use the exact same setup here, looking at developed and non-developed, but set it across environment, process, and tools. That said, environment is not a solution, whereas lack of processes and lack of tools and tech are. The processes and tools and tech are what mitigate environmental factors. So actually, the way I think about this now is, you know, processes and tools and tech.
Okay.
With processes, how do you fix things? Well, that's education. So number one, we have to make sure that, across the world, in each area, farmers are attuned to what needs to happen in terms of the right processes for growing crops. Again, these are things like, do they know about crop rotation? Do they know about leaving fields fallow? Do they know about not having plows go a certain depth so as to not ruin the subsoil, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Moving on, secondly, with the tools and tech, I actually think I want to split this out a little bit.
Okay.
With tools, we're really talking machines. So it's bringing in the proper equipment for these farmers. I think that this probably applies more to the developing world than the developed, but essentially, bringing in automated plows, bringing in watering systems, bringing in fertilizing systems, etc. The third one is tech. And so I'm splitting the tools and tech here. And with tech, these are things like having mobile phones and access to internet to be able to basically, understand what the weather patterns are, or to learn oneself about the processes, et cetera, basically access to knowledge and information. And another one would be, phones, again, for apps to understand what the market is asking for prices for goods, et cetera. To organize things like pickups and distribution of crops and get workers into fields that are, when crops are ready so that the crops don't rot. Basically bringing in this technology that lets farmers and again, manufacturers of food better coordinate activities and understand what's going on with the market, with the economy, et cetera, to bring that in. So just to kind of summarize, we have the process side, which is teaching food producers how to work effectively. We have the tools side, which is bringing in equipment that will let them work more efficiently. And then we have the tech, which is access to your IT, your tech, internet, phones, etc., and different apps and functionalities to basically work more efficiently. I know I keep kind of locking into the developing world, but this can still apply in the developed world as well.
Yeah, it absolutely can. Of these three areas of solutions, which one do you think will be the most difficult for them to implement? And how would you work on overcoming those challenges?
That's such a great question. Are we talking in the developing world or the
developing world?
In the developing. So processes is teaching someone how to do something. Which you can do. Tools, you have to get the tools and tech over there, and then they have to be maintained, and the person has to be taught how to use them.
Right.
And there has to be an ecosystem in place. Tech, again, you have to bring the tech over and teach them how to use, but kind of once it's there, it's got a long life. Funnily enough, I actually think that the tools and the equipment would be the hardest because you do have, if you're shipping a tractor over, okay, but then you need maintenance for the tractor. You need the parts to be replaced. You need to show them how to use it, when to use it. So the tech and the the tools and the equipment actually have processes and know-how, have tech as part of their learning process and implementation. So I think those would actually be the hardest, even though they're the most tangible.
Got it. Awesome. So we actually do have some ideas for initiatives, and I'm going to show you some of those right now.
Sounds
so
good.
Let me just take a second to get that up on your screen. Okay. And I'm curious of these initiatives that would help address these problems we've been discussing in the developing world. Which are most appealing to you and why?
Okay, quite a bit going on here. So as you mentioned, these are initiatives to reduce just the production waste. Okay, so that's that 13%. If we, and it looks like we have a few options here, 5 of them, and then we're looking at the amount that they can reduce in the cost. Okay, to confirm, when we say reduction in waste percent per ton, is that the percent reduction on the production percent?
So this is so it's the reduction on the it's so for example, this 15%, we're not, obviously, as we know, there's only 13% issue, so it's 15% of the 13%.
Beautiful. Perfect. Makes total sense. And then on the cost per ton, that's the cost, that's how much it would cost us to implement that initiative, as in if we can reduce 10 tons and it costs $50.
It's the cost. It's basically, as you mentioned, it's the cost to implement. So
Okay.
higher cost is more kind of burden to actually implement the initiative here.
That makes perfect sense. Now, so as I'm looking at this, the main one that stands out, so shared internet resource, is of course going to have the most reduction in waste, followed by rollout of resistant GMO crops, followed by education crop rotation. So those are the three most impactful,
right?
In terms of the amount of reduction. Now, I know we didn't say there was a specific cost constraint, but basically anything we do, period, even when it's NGOs or nonprofits, we have to consider cost because that's efficiency. So if we look at the cost per ton, I'd want that to be low.
Great.
Okay, so shared internet resource is actually the lowest, so that's quite the combo. And then the other two lowest are real-time analysis of field health and rollout of resistant GMO crops. Okay,
great.
And education crop rotation, which was our third, most effective in terms of total reduction, is actually very costly. Okay, so I'd kind of rule out that one, at least for now. We don't, we might be able to do all five. But as a priority, it looks like shared internet resource, number one, and rollout of resistant crops, number two, would be the initiatives that we want to really dive into. Do we have any info about those, how we'd roll them out, what that looks like, anything like that?
Unfortunately, no. It seems like those are the best ones. We don't have further information at the moment.
Okay. If you like, I can run some calculations here on the total cost and the total reduction. But right now, if we grab those two, it would be 35% on that 30%. So we're talking about a 10% reduction in total waste.
Great.
And costing us, well, an average of those two, almost weighted average, but costing us $350 a ton. I can go further if you like.
As we talked about at the beginning, let's kind of build a high level strategy here, and we'll get the boots on the ground in future work sessions. So given that, where would you like to go now?
Okay. Are we able to launch any of these other initiatives in production waste? Are there other initiatives that we have to reduce production waste? Anything else within this production waste thread?
No, this is the best they've got.
Okay. Okay. Now, if that's everything for production, I know that we did talk about those other 4 areas actually. And I know that if I recall correctly, consumer at table, I think it was called, was 8%. Do we have any info on that one? Any sort of breakdown of what that waste looks like, or areas or places that we could, incentives or initiatives that we could implement?
Yeah, unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have anything as specific as what we just talked about in terms of initiatives. However, I'm curious if you have a hypothesis or a sense of where you think that this consumption waste problem might be most focused in the world, given what we also discussed before.
Yep. So again, confirming that when we say consumption, that means households. That means people buying food.
Last step of that chart we looked at.
Well, I know America. I know we're part of the problem. I know that there is a lot of waste there.
How do you know that?
Well, if we look at that theme, when you can't afford much, you don't buy much, and you eat more. So I've got to think that the developed world, sticking on that theme earlier, the developed world is going to be the bigger culprit. So you're talking about the U.S., Canada, better part of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, places like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So that's correct. That's where most of that issue takes place. So your intuition is right. And we believe that with a series of informational campaigns, as well as an incentive to reduce waste, we can significantly bring down consumption waste in those developed world countries that you just mentioned. So we think that our initiatives can reduce consumption waste and I'm going to tell you how it will break down by household types here. Okay. So in the developing world, for lower income households, it will reduce the waste by 10%.
Sorry, developing or developed world?
Oh, sorry. My bad. Developed. My bad.
Yeah, okay, got you. Yep.
In the middle income households, it will reduce that waste by 40%. And then in
Wow.
upper income, it will reduce it by 50%.
Okay. And did you mention the lower income, how much?
10%.
Okay. And that's the percent reduction that we will be able to get from this. And do you know what the initiative is, or it's a series of initiatives, or?
Yeah, it's basically a series of informational campaigns and that will help to incentivize folks to reduce waste.
Okay,
and so these
that's
are, you can think
incredible.
of it sort of falls into an educational way of letting people know about the problem and getting them to drive their behavior change.
Okay, that's incredible. And then do we know those populations, or the amount of, I guess, consumption, amount of food that those populations consume across a period of time? Any further info that would help me understand the amount of reduction?
Yeah, so we're not looking for an absolute amount of reduction here. We're looking for kind of percent reduction. So what information would help you get to that?
Population, I suppose if we're doing percents, it would be kind of the percent of what those populations are in the total world. I mean, I could estimate it as well, but I'm curious if we have hard numbers.
Let's have you estimate it. If you're totally off track, I'll drive you, or I'll nudge you back on.
Sure thing. So again, if production waste is, consumption waste is 8% of the world. We're reducing this in the developed world.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a percent of that. So, if I think of, I always have to keep out, it's like my age, I have to keep updating this number. The world population keeps growing. So I believe it's around 8 billion right now. And if we think about Europe, that's about 1.1 billion, 750 million. Japan plus South Korea plus Australia, New Zealand Japan's about 120, South Korea is about 60. Then you throw in Taiwan, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand. So, I think we're at around 300 million there. And then the United States and Canada, you're looking at about 300 million. So we've got 600 plus 750. So we've got around like 1.3 billion. I think I'll round up to 1.5 because I'm sure I'm missing. A couple, UAE and things like that.
Don't worry about getting it super exact.
So we've got 1.5 billion in the developed world. And now what I have to do is figure out the population of lower, upper, and middle percents. So inequality is growing. So my understanding of the, sort of Gini coefficient of these countries and the breakdown is that we can probably consider the upper 10%, upper class to be about 10% of the population.
Yeah, I agree.
The shrinking middle class at about 50%, and lower class at 40%.
Okay.
So if it's all right with you, what I'd probably do is I'd multiply out the population of lower, middle, upper times the percent reduction of lower, middle, upper. I'd add those together because that's my essentially added weighted average. And then I'd multiply that by the percent that the developed world is of the population, and then multiply that by 8%. Is that correct? That would get us kind of our absolute.
That is fair. Yes.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Now, as an aside, we're going to skip that part in the case, just because I don't want to do all that math.
Cool.
But rest assured, I can do all that math if I really want.
You got to show us.
So back to case mode. What is the amount there that we have?
So in the key, you don't account for the percent of the world that is developed. So that step skips, but the way you do it verbally is correct.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll, I'm guessing that the developed world is, since it's 1.5 of 8%, we're just doing this quickly for the candidate, but 1.5 out of 8 billion is going to be about 20% of the population is developed. So that's 20%, but then 20% of 8%. But then the reduction in middle, upper, lower, if you think about, middle has 40% reduction, upper is 50, lower has 40, and middle is 50% of the population and lower is 40%, you can kind of just eyeball this and go, okay, like your reduction is going to be about 30%, because you've got the 40% of the 40, 50% of the 40 and 40% of the 10. So you kind of round it up. So if you take 20% of 8%, you're going to get 816 1.6, and then you get your 30% of that.
Yeah.
So it's not much.
It's not much, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll call it 1%. Okay, beautiful. In a real case, we'd have to do the math. Right now, we're just eyeballing. That shows that you can kind of do fast math to get your numbers. Okay. So back in the case mode, here's where, if I jump back in, I would say, great. So we've got about 1% of reduction for the consumer. Unfortunately, you know, that's much less than our other initiative, but still helpful, of course. I'd be curious, do we have any more information around the consumption at table, things we can do to reduce, or any of those other food waste areas?
This is it. Let's say that we are ready to put forth a recommendation for how this organization should go about driving down waste here.
Beautiful. If you can just give me 1 moment.
Go for it.
I'm going to think through that.
Okay. Okay. What's on your mind here?
Beautiful. So I recommend that we jump into 2 main areas of food waste reduction. The first is launching our initiatives on the consumer at table side to bring down a total food waste by 1%. And the second is to launch 2 initiatives to reduce wastage that occurs at the production side of food. That is shared internet resources and rollout of persistent GMO crops, which would bring down production waste by 35% and therefore total global food waste by 5%. Those 2 initiatives together would be 6%. And 6% of 1.5 trillion is quite a lot. Now, some risks that I see here are, first of all, these are pretty blanket initiatives. And so what we haven't done is we haven't tailored them to regions or parts of the world. And therefore, my concern here would be, can we really do this? Can this really happen effectively? The second concern is that there might be so much of a focus on food wastage that we're not looking at food production growth, right? As I mentioned before, there might be suboptimal production. If you can increase food production by 20%, instead of food wastage reduction by 6%, you've done better. It's not the best for the environment, but if our goal is food waste reduction, then that's it. So those are kind of the 2 main risks I see there. Therefore, as next steps, I recommend, number 1, we look at doing a deep dive into the main initiatives we've identified, but across more specific regions, certain continents or regions of continents, to make sure that we've kind of tailored these initiatives for each, culture, demographic, language, et cetera, environment. And then in terms of the output, let's just look at if our end goal is actually to reduce world hunger, we want to be careful making our goal food waste reduction. It should be a combo food waste reduction and increased output. So just taking a look at the options for increasing output, and we can do a similar cost per ton thing like we had before to really measure which initiatives make the most sense. We want the biggest bang for buck at the end of the day. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Okay. So how did I do, Mr. Coach?
You did well. Do you want, what sort of debrief do you want to do?
I was thinking of running through the case really quick. I'll kind of share my screen. My first question for you is, how many sheets of paper do you think I have, or do you think a candidate should have here?
For this one, I would guess around 4.
Yeah, I had 6. The reason I have 6, and it's hard to show my sheets of paper now, so I'll save the viewer the difficulty of that. But my first page was, of course, our case template sheet 1. It's the objective, is the framework, etc. Our second sheet was the brainstorming around production waste. Sorry, my apologies. I have my sheets misaligned. The second one was where the wastage occurs, and that was the first exhibit. And that just basically had the title and the conclusion, which was the 2 main initiatives and that up to. Third sheet of paper was the brainstorm on where production waste occurs. The fourth one was the brainstorm on the initiatives that we could do to do that, the solutions. The fifth one was the Excel, chart and graph that you showed me on that production waste. And then the final one was the consumer at table 1. And you probably could have had a side sheet of math paper. So I really would have had 7, but I didn't do math because I cheated here. So that many sheets, and some of them are pretty empty, but it makes sense. So let me pull up the case and we'll kind of talk through it. And, feel free to jump in wherever, you kind of see candidates, make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, sounds great.
But I think I'm sharing my screen now.
Yep. Good.
Okay. All right. So full disclosure, I did write this case. So obviously I'm cheating a bit, but we'll have future videos where I don't know the case at all. In terms of a candidate, the main thing here is you just have to really, understand that this is a nonprofit. That means that the objective gets measured a little bit differently, and the way we think about this problem is different. Here, of course, where candidates have trouble is when they over-explain all of this and they look at the lowest and they look at the most. Always focus on the biggest number. Always focus on the biggest number or the biggest changing. And then really clearly state your insight. Put it at the bottom of your sheet and make sure you have that there. Same thing goes for this exhibit here in terms of the initiatives to reduce production waste. Always have your eyes go to the biggest numbers and then focus in on those, right? What is the biggest? What is the smallest? What is changing the most? And then remembering the objective. And so candidates spend way too long talking to both of these. I almost spent way too long, but then just no matter what at the end, you need to say very clearly, what's that takeaway? But I want to think about the frameworks. These are all of the frameworks. So, I chose to talk through framework option 3, which is a sort of life cycle sort of framework. You could also do the other life cycle part of the framework, which was what we ended up seeing as an exhibit. That's production, storage, packaging, handling, retail, consumer. And then you can actually take a side that's the levers that we can pull. So we can pull social, political, economic, and environmental levers, right? That's the focus or the area in which we look at reducing this waste. A fourth framework option is basically government, producer, consumer. That's the stakeholders, right? So who can we affect? Who can we influence to reduce waste? These are the 3 people that cause the waste. Therefore, let's go look at those 3 and ways in which we can do it. Now, this social, political, economic, environmental could sit underneath as sub-buckets for government, producer, and consumer, right? Government, producer, consumer could sit, well, it can't really sit under this one, but it could sit under these top ones, right? And then finally, this is actually one from the BCG website. So it shows the importance of doing daily reading with BCG Insights, McKinsey Insights. But this case was inspired by, and yes, I'll use the word inspired, not stolen, inspired by BCG Insights. They just have a white paper on this topic. Then I built out the whole case kind of around the concept. But they have a whole framework around this, which is these 4. I don't love it for a case, but it does show you how you can be really tailored in creating well-organized buckets. But I love this because, I mean, Jeremy, I'm sure you agree with this. People go, what is the framework for X, right? It's like, well, you need to create a tailored one.
Yeah, totally.
Any other thoughts or reflections you had on the case? I mean, I don't want to spend too long diving on the math. We'll provide a link to the course, which, has this case and provides answers. But any thoughts on, the brainstorming, the math, any of the flow there?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly on the framework, so I advise people to get really clear, and you did this with a question on whether or not we're focusing on the diagnosis or the solutioning, because I think a lot of people don't ever, it doesn't cross their mind, but that impacts the framing of the framework a lot. So if it's a diagnosis, then you're hunting for the root cause. But if it's a solutioning, then you're looking at levers. But if it's both, you have to incorporate language of both in there.
There
And so I
you
think
go.
your clarifying question confirmed that sort of the ultimate goal is to make change here and not just get the root cause. So I noticed that you had both going on there, but I think this is a huge thing that this is a key cue that they didn't listen to the question.
Yeah. Now I'm going to ask a question that sounds like I'm coaching you, but what case type does what you just said most apply to? As in not mixing up the root cause versus the solution.
Oh, yeah. What does it most apply to? Yeah. So it applies a lot to profitability questions.
Bingo.
Yeah. Like people don't know which one it is.
Yeah. Because and most often the objective is to fix the problem, not to identify stuff. So that's why in this case, I know it's an NGO, but like I had to clarify, are we looking at the sources of food waste, i.e. the problem, or are we looking at reducing food waste? The prompt said both. You got to clarify as a candidate, what's the end goal? Reduce. Same thing with profitability. They go, we have a problem. I hate when candidates just go, oh, well, let's go look if the problem is here, here, or here. Well, but what if you can't fix the problem? What if the root cause of the problem is that copper costs more money, so now your cost basis is higher? Your solution is not to get cheaper copper. You can't. It's a global commodity. You're not going to change that. So investigating the root cause will only get you so far. Your framework cannot just be the root cause analysis on most profitability frameworks. It has to be solutioning in a sense, or areas of investigation, which look at both root cause and solution, right? The end goal is to increase profitability, not find out why profitability is down. Finding why profitability is down is helpful. It's not the end all be all. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition.
Yeah, I agree. So when this comes up, I do have candidates a lot of times explicitly ask, basically, like when I think through my initial approach to the question, do you want me to focus mostly on the diagnosing, the solutioning, or both? And so they will get. The funny thing is that a lot of times the ways that these people, the interviewers themselves, haven't thought about it deeply enough to know that. So that's part of, like, if you ask that, you're already ahead of most people, because you're almost like showing them a new way of thinking about it. They just get given this case, and it's like it's almost usually written poorly, actually.
Yeah, well, that's what kills me as well. I actually have helped some consultant friends of mine write cases for their interviews. I actually helped a partner friend of mine create a case, and he had already written a case, but it was horrible. And we spent like an hour just working through it. And at the end, he's like, oh my God, this case makes so much more sense. They're not writing cases for a living, right? They're doing the consulting. So it is always funny. Candidates sometimes come back and they're like, the case didn't make sense. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that can happen. Or the interviewer thinks revenue cost is a good framework. And so, we can be right about the frameworks, but it also depends on the interviewer you get. You may as well have the best framework possible. You get interviewers all the time that think that like risks is a good bucket.
No, totally. Or other considerations.
Never a good bucket.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, sometimes a consultant is interviewing you and they've been on the job for 2 years. So, they don't have it down pat. Nor did I. So, there's that. Any other thoughts on the case? Anything else you want to kind of go over, or pitfalls you see, or something you thought I could have done better, or something you thought I demonstrated well, just for people to look back on?
Yeah. Let me just think about the different sections here. So I think you did the math well. I'm kidding. I
wasn't going to do that.
Math went well. I mean, I didn't like how you, in the brainstorms around with the developing world, what the problems and solutions could be, that you had a clear structure for the categories of those questions, and it was pretty comprehensive. And then you called out how you were going to use that. It made perfect sense, right? You have a model for like, these are the problems. Let's just now bolt the solutions on.
Yeah, you have to have the model, but then you have to give specific examples, because it's not a framework, it's a brainstorming. So you don't have to be perfectly MECE on a brainstorm. But it's obviously mine were pretty MECE, but I've had practice with my case. But for brainstorming, it's frameworking light. So it's not perfectly MECE, but you definitely need examples, right?
Yeah, you need specifics. Yeah. So I think you did that well in the solutions. I I advise candidates generally, basically the general rule of thumb, the more specific, the better applies to any brainstorm. So you could just have to think about it from the perspective, and I'm talking to the viewers, like rather than you, like when someone's doing the same case the whole day, they don't want to hear educate people. They want to hear like run classes, like build schools,
Whereas
put
the
up.
framework is the opposite. The framework is the opposite. You shouldn't go into just, what about this? What about this? What about this? It's like, no, we need a structured approach to solving the problem, not a whole bunch of random ideas. So that there is that. Both are organized. It's just the depth at which you go. Yeah, agreed.
For sure. Cool. Those are the big things. I think, I mean, obviously from a case leadership perspective, that's, I think, the biggest area where you could see like the beginning candidates don't necessarily have that intuition of how to use the framework to then drive the case.
Yeah. So case leadership first requires mastery of frameworking, and then it requires the ability to adjust your frameworks. And so basically, when you get this exhibit and we dive into all the production stuff, you always, like, I know I'm saying you, but I'm talking to the viewer again. You know, you always have to think, okay, where am I in the case? So we were at where does all the waste occur? We've identified that production is the biggest one, so that's where we go first. We dive into the initiatives. We can't leave until we know we're done with production. So we have to ask a question in production, even after we've gotten that second exhibit here. Are there any others? Is there anything else that we can do in production? And if not, we zoom back up that tree.
Right.
And then we go down the next branch, which you can decide. It's either ask specifically about consumers or say, do we have anything on all these others? And that tree has two branches. Further breakdown of those value chains, i.e. further steps, or initiatives, things that we can do to change. And you can ask, you should ask the first one, even though in this case we don't have that data, just a further breakdown. Any more info about this wastage? Answer is no. Okay. What about info on initiatives or things we can do to reduce? And then again, if you go down into consumers at table, you need to make sure you're done there. And then if you're done there, you zoom back up and you go, how about anything else across the value chain? That's case leadership, not getting lost about where you are, always following that branch that you're on back up until you're at the next fork in the road. And yeah, you got to be able to framework for that. You got to have case sheet organization for that. And yeah, this case could go 100 different ways. Your job is not to predict it, right? Your job is to create the pathways that allow the info to be uncovered for however the case writer decided to write the case. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And one other thing I'll add to that is that usually I would say there is a specific goal in mind. And so once you have that goal, the case is essentially, let's see if we can get there or not. And so a lot of times there's like this threshold that like once you cross it, then it's like, okay, we're probably getting ready to wrap things up. We've hit with this one. It wasn't clear. Are we there?
Are we there? Are we not? Yeah.
Is it good enough?
We're kind of in this one, we're there when we were out of options. But yeah, that's what I call the secondary objective, right? The primary objective is what are you trying to solve? Like, what is the client bringing you in to answer? What does the RFP say at the top? Yeah. And the secondary objective is what you just said, which you always have to clarify: how much, right?
Yeah.
To what extent, right? Because then you know when you're done. Yeah. Nice. Cool. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate you.
Sure.
And just to anyone watching, if you want more tips, want more tricks, you can reach out to Jeremy. You can reach out to myself, part of Custom Case Coach. So this case is in the 360-degree consultant recruiting course. Got a million more like it. And obviously nothing beats life coaching, right? So to be able to kind of go in and out of all these things. But thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Our client